Hey all, so back for another Spotlight with Context. I also want to say up front, I don't know yet if this is going to come out late or not, or if I'm going to have to record this in pieces. But if my mind is wandering, or if either of those things are true, it's probably because I currently have COVID. I have been very off this week, and so I'm kind of playing catch up here. I may have to stop to cough. Obviously, I'll edit those out, but just yeah, if I lose my train of thought, that's probably why. But with that in mind, we got stuff to get through, so I'm not going to talk about it again. So today we're talking about Solvarch, the third out of the four idols this year. They are tech and most closely related to Ice Fiend and Lumitrix. That's the previous two. I'm going to get right into the attributes here. Survivability of 4. Solvarch is a tank. Is very good at restricting incoming damage, can regenerate some of it, can turn some of it into further armor, just kind of overlapping plates, right? They look big, they are big, it's good at keeping them alive. Damage of 3, they can build up to some really solid damage, especially in target matchups. But in most matchups, it's going to be a while until they get there, and then doing the thing somewhat burns them out, and then they need to build back up. So all of that averages out to solid damage, especially when you're targeting them appropriately, but not exceptional. Ease of use 2, you kind of have to juggle some resources. Honestly, I think 2 might be underselling it a little bit. That's kind of like if you really want to line up everything perfectly and trade all of the resources at the exact right time for the exact most damage. But yeah, I think there is a like 70% of total output path here that's pretty simple by just kind of spamming special 1 and tapping the block button a few times. We'll talk about that as we go. Utility of 3, there's some solid stuff here. There's power drain, there's heal block, there's regeneration, there's a character that doesn't crit, there is cold snap, so there's easy anti-evade. The utility is quite solid. And then defender strength of 3, most of this comes down to the survivability, honestly. Like, there's not much of a kill threat here, but the various tank factors, including the regen, can cause you problems if you're not careful. And so you do need to think a little bit about who you bring against Solvarch, which leads us to 3. So, getting into the abilities, Solvarch is a tech idol, thus has a fractured power bar. For those of you who aren't familiar, that means that they are able to use any special they have power for. That means if Solvarch has 3 bars of power, they can use special 1, 2, or 3, and is immune to bleed and poison effects. Solvarch's regen rate cannot be reduced below 50%, and against mutants cannot be reduced below 100%. So, this isn't just full anti-modification, right? The recovery mastery can increase it. Even if you're facing mutants, despair can bring it back down to cancel out recovery. And against anybody else, you can bring it all the way down to 50%. But you're not going to be zeroing it out. You're not going to be reversing it. That's what this is telling you. Solvarch's parry mastery can trigger its stun against non-contact attacks, so parry non-contact. Fairly common in tech these days and very effective, and Solvarch cannot land critical hits but gains extra attack rating for each active energize effect. So you want to stack up those energizes and just generally hit harder. Note this does mean Solvarch doesn't have an immediate crit replacement effect, though. They're not replacing crits they would land with some kind of instant damaging effect like some other techs. And that is both good in some ways and bad in others, because it does mean they're kind of vulnerable punching into armor. That is why I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and say now the recommended stat focus on this spotlight is armor penetration, because Solvarch doesn't really have another way to punch through armor. Armor penetration is going to make more of that extra attack rating they have access to actually matter in the fight. It's a very, very strong choice for them. So next up, Solvarch starts each fight with 5 indefinite armor up passives. These can be removed by armor breaks, and while Solvarch has any active armor up effects, they reduce the opponent's critical penetration by 80% flat. As a reminder, critical penetration's base value is 80%. So what this means is that if Solvarch has any armor ups at all, the opponent's crits just don't ignore any armor or resistance. And this right here is the biggest reason that Solvarch is a 3 on defense, because that is a significant amount of tank, right? That's the same ability that Zola has. Solvarch is not Zola on defense, doesn't have anywhere near the same kind of threats. But this is a major stall factor in Zola's kit, and it is here as well. But you can turn this off by controlling their armor, and so that means that Cosmics are still well situated to deal with this. Additionally, anyone with true damage is going to ignore this. So there are plenty of options, but I want to highlight this. If you are running into Solvarch in Battlegrounds or War, and they are taking longer than you expected to kill, it's probably this bullet that's doing it. So moving on to ISO Core. This is kind of the core resource in their kit. The ISO Core inside Solvarch's chest can be in either Absorb mode or Release mode, and starts in Absorb at 25. Those charges can go up to 100. Against non-cosmic opponents, when charged to 100, Solvarch inflicts a non-stacking 50% kinetic discharge passive for 10 seconds. On non-cosmic opponents, this is paused while at 100 core charge. So kinetic discharge means that when the affected champion deals energy damage, they receive a percentage of that damage back as physical damage. Now, as a reminder, this is going on Solvarch's opponent, so that means when their opponent deals outgoing energy damage, their opponent receives, in this case, 50% of that outgoing damage back as physical damage. So Cosmics ignore this, right? If you're using a Cosmic champion with energy damage against Solvarch, you don't have to worry about effectively reverbing yourself. But if you're using anybody else with energy damage, you need to be very, very careful. Solvarch wants to be countered by Cosmics, and if you don't have access to a Cosmic, Solvarch wants to be countered by somebody who can focus all of their damage output as physical. So when Solvarch takes energy damage, they passively regenerate 50% of the damage taken and build 10 core charge. Note that there is not a cooldown on this, so if Solvarch is inflicted with a bunch of distinct energy damage over time effects, and those damage over time effects aren't synced, as a reminder, dots deal their damage twice per second. If they're not perfectly synced up, you can potentially be taking energy damage like 10 or 20 times per second. And so the regen handles itself, right? 50% of the damage taken. But that can mean that Solvarch is just sitting at 100 charge forever, right? If you're taking somebody like Onslaught, who's randomly putting multiple neuroshocks against you, each of which is relatively weak, but which are probably not in sync, then you are probably going to be sitting at 100 core charge the entire match without really caring about it. And that is the core, aspect of what I meant earlier about Solvarch having target matchups where they really pop off. You want incoming energy damage as a means of dealing more damage and just generally having more access to your kit. When Solvarch takes any damage from a mutant, they build 10 core charge. So that means that just blocking normal hits is also going to do this. And then when the opponent is inflicted with a cold snap debuff, which we'll get to soon, Solvarch builds 5 core charge. This is more of an attacker loop. If you are not taking incoming energy damage, or if you're not facing a mutant where you can block hits, this is what you want to focus on. You want to land those cold snaps and just build your core charge naturally that way. Additionally, when Solvarch activates a special attack, they build core charge for each full bar of power remaining. This is incentivizing you to use that fractured power bar, right? Don't just throw the special one as soon as you get access to it. Build up to 2 or 3 bars and then throw your special ones so that you build charge faster. Now, in Absorb mode, Solvarch builds a charge every second. So even if you're not throwing those special ones, not taking energy damage, not applying cold snaps, you're just naturally going to be headed up. And then Solvarch's second medium inflicts a cold snap debuff, dealing 30% energy damage over 20 seconds. So this does mean Solvarch has pretty easy access to that cold snap. Notice that it doesn't deal a lot of damage, but it does last for a really long time, so that's a very powerful evade counter. It's also on the second medium, so it's optional, right? If you are facing somebody like Onslaught or Bishop, who punishes incoming energy damage, you probably don't want to ever use this. But the tool is there, and often is going to be something you actively want. Once you change into release mode, you lose 4 core charge every second, but what you're getting for that is a reverb passive with up to 300% potency based on the current core charge. So that means at 100 charge, this is a 300% reverb. At, 10 charge, it's a 30% reverb. But as a reminder, what reverb does is it's basically the positive version of trauma, right? So whenever Solvarch hits the opponent, that landed hit is then going to deal a burst of physical damage equal to this potency. So that means when Solvarch lands a hit at 100 charge, then you're going to see a white number for Solvarch's actual hit, and then a red number 3 times that size that is this 300% potency. This is also why, doubling back to it, armor penetration is such an important stat focus for Solvarch, because cutting through the opponent's armor is going to increase your landed hit damage, which is then also going to increase the red numbers that you deal with reverb. Now, for all special attacks, Solvarch wants to tap block during them to gain bonuses. While in absorb mode, each tap consumes 10 core charge to gain an indefinite armor up passive. As a reminder, these stack up to 10, same ones mentioned before. And then in release mode, tapping consumes 1 armor up effect to gain a 15% energized passive for 14 seconds that are then paused during special attacks. These also stack up to 10. And as a reminder, each of these energizes grants Solvarch extra attack rating, and so lets him do more damage. So that means that you can have up to 150% extra combat power rate and a lot of extra attack, plus your reverbs, by consuming those armors and turning them into energizes. Very, very strong. Additionally, Solvarch gains 50% more combat power rate on top of all of that when it max energizes. So that's really your incentive to chase all 10 of them. It's not just, okay, well, I can hold on to some of these armors and just gain a few of these energizes and then I hit harder. No, this is telling you you actually want to trade all of them in so that you are just racing through your power bar while doing a ton of damage. And then as a defender, Solvarch converts all available core charge or half of available armor ups over the course of their special attack, depending on which mode they're in. So that's just telling you you don't have to worry about the AI tapping block some weird number of times. It's just a predictable, when they're in absorb mode, they consume all core charge. When they're in release mode, they consume half of their armor ups. Now, this also does mean that a defending Solvarch is probably going to be significantly less likely to ever get to max energizes and gain that extra 50%, but it is technically possible, so just shouting out that wrinkle. Now, Special 1. On activation, change the ISO core mode. So this allows you to move from absorb to release or vice versa. Timing this appropriately is going to be a very important part of how you play Solvarch. In absorb mode, if he has at least 5 armor up passives, then the final hit power drains 30% of the opponent's current power. So that can be almost up to a bar if they are at full. And then in the release mode, if Solvarch has at least 5 energized passives, the final hit inflicts a stun debuff, allowing you to get back in there and capitalize on those energizes by building even more power. Then the Special 2, in absorb mode, the final hit inflicts a power drain debuff, which lasts a nice long time because it is paused while you're in absorb mode. So you can get this power drain up and then use the special 1 to switch into release mode, get the heal block up, then switch back into absorb mode and re-pause the power drain. Basically, you can only have either the power drain or the heal block paused at once, but you can have both of them active with only one of them paused. That's the important point. And the heal block is a passive, so it does work nicely with the vision relic if you want to go that way. Generally, you're probably using Green Goblin on a character that cares this much about power efficiency, but quick note out of our normal programming for that. Final note on the special 2, 10 seconds and 15 seconds is on the short side for something that we throw on a special 2, but just remember that you do have control over pausing them, and so if you really need either of these pieces of utility, you can focus on them. And then the special 3, this is the kill shot, right? Increase attack rating by up to 16,000 based on core charge. Now, random numbers of attack rating, I realize, don't mean a lot, but that is like 3 times the bonus Solvarch has from having all 10 of their energizes online at the same time, just to shout it out, so it's very significant. And at the end of this attack, consume all of Solvarch's core charge and enter absorb mode. So you are just basically going to do a ton of damage with this special 3, and then reset. But as a reminder, you can potentially have those energizes active on the other side of this special attack, and you can have the reverb up for this special attack. Meaning that this can deal a bunch of damage and then also deal a bunch of red numbers on the other side, and you can still have some time to build up power quickly off the back of those energizes once you're done. Now, it's going to be harder to hold on to all of those energizes because you're going to be out of core charge and you are going to need to reset somewhat, but it is not a full back to square 0 reset. Lastly, signature ability, Wolf of the Stars. When Solvarch's block would be broken due to unblockable or crush effects, they consume somewhere in between 5 and 2 armor up passives to gain a steadfast passive for 2 seconds, which will let them block that unblockable. And while Solvarch has a steadfast, they are immune to crush, right? So normally crush punches through steadfast, but because Solvarch goes immune to crush when they gain the steadfast, this just basically means, hey, if you would break my block, no, you don't. So that comes with that armor up cost. It only lasts for 2 seconds. But if the hit is from a special attack, then reduce the armor up cost by 50%. So that's going to make it more possible for you to block multiple unblockable or crushing special attacks, right? Each steadfast is only going to last for 2 seconds, but if the special attack is long enough and you need multiple ones, then you are going to get a discount on how many armor ups it costs you. Very powerful ability. I think this is the first ability that actively counters crush, and that's why it has a cost attached to it, as opposed to just some other tech champions that can block mutant unblockables without a restriction. But note that this does apply to basics if it needs to. It's not just for specials. And so I think this ability is absolutely worth the cost you pay for it. You are going to want Solvarch duped if you are, you know, the kind of person that gets hit by unblockable specials from time to time, which I think is most of us. Looking at the synergies with the other idols, Solvarch builds an additional 5 core charge for each full bar of power remaining when activating a special attack, so just tripling down on that fractured power bar thing. With Vision, Arcus, and Iceman, 2 of their Cold Snap bros, Solvarch is inflicted with a Cold Snap debuff, dealing 5 energy damage over 2.5 seconds. So that just means that you get 5 guaranteed ticks of energy damage. And each one is only going to do 1 energy damage. So that's not even enough for you to regen from. But, boom, there's 50 core charge from taking energy damage. Very helpful. And then for other synergy champions, Cold Snap debuffs gain increased potency, so Arcus and Iceman can do more damage. On the flip side of things, with Sunspot and Human Torch, at the start of the fight, Solvarch gains an Energize passive, increasing combat power rate by 20% for 14 seconds, so just getting them going. And then Sunspot and Human Torch get increased Incinerate debuff potency. Now, it is worth noting that Sunspot normally is not dealing most of his damage through Incinerates, and Torch is already increasing his Incinerate potency. So this is not a huge bonus for either of them. It will be somewhat watered out by their other damage sources, but it's not nothing. And this is a pretty good pair because this is a tech champion with immunities next to either a mutant or a science champion who have immunities, but immunities that don't overlap with Solvarch. So, nice pairing anyway. And then lastly, we have Big and Tall with Kingpin and Joe Fixit. For Solvarch, the first time each fight their ISO core reaches 0, they instantly pop back up to 25, so a little bit smoother the first time you need to reset. For Kingpin, he starts with yet another rage debuff at the start of the fight. When you combine this with the recoil masteries and some other synergies, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, this lets you just block once and go into overpower. Pretty strong. And then for Joe Fixit, Dead Man's Hand debuffs last an additional 2 seconds per bar of power spent. So this means that you can have some really good uptime on your Disorients or your Petrifies if you need them, especially if you are activating them properly with the Special 2. So before we finish up, I want to look at the champion summary real quick. This one is a little longer, more prose, but just to go through it, Solvarch is based around having these 2 modes. You swap between with the Special 1, Absorb builds core charge, Release mode spends it for damage. Pretty simple. Depending on which mode you're in, you want to tap your block during your special attacks to spend charge for armor ups or armor ups for energize. 5 is an important threshold for either of these during the Special 1. And then these energizes also grant bonus attack rating, and reaching 10 energizes is an important payout for even more combat power rate. The Special 3 spends a lot of this for damage, and you want the reverb up for the Special 3. On defense, you want to watch for armor ups turning into energizes, and so try to remove them with armor breaks or in other ways. Watch out for the Fractured Power Bar, because it means that Solvarch can throw Special 1 even when they have 2 bars of power. And if Solvarch gets to 100 core charge and you're not using a Cosmic, be very, very careful with your energy damage. You're gonna want to wait this out if you can. And that's going to be harder if you're dealing energy damage, so generally try to avoid energy damage wherever you can, at least with non-cosmics. And just generally don't use mutants at all against Solvarch. Bad times. And yeah, that is Solvarch. Like we said, the third of our 4 idols. A bit of a stall on defense, and there is some potential for a torch trap style, oops, they only have non-cosmics that deal energy damage left, they're going to die kind of thing in Battlegrounds. But outside of that, mostly just a tough to kill quickly. I think they're going to end up landing on the lower side of 3 for impact, but we'll see. Those things are hard to predict perfectly. Mainly, Solvarch is, a flexible, high-utility attacker with some really strong target matchups. And I think they're going to have really nice success there. So let me know what you're excited about, what your thoughts are in the comments. And until next time, thank you so much for watching, and take care.